arrival. But us, we go to the US Embassy, you are queued there. They make us go through hoops. They take our application fees. They don't even refund. Which is why I was saying the other place we should be occupying is occupying US Embassy. Because how do they charge $200 for an application where they already have a quota where they know we are going to allow these ones? They already have a quota. So today they say we are only allowing 20 or 30. So everyone there, you are just going as a formality because they have they are pre-decided and predetermined who is going to get a visa and who is not going to. And then we have seen this Meg Whitman. She has insinuated herself so much in our policy making. She's taking selfies. She's doing a lot of PDA with Ruto. And I'm saying, who the fuck does she think she is? She's just a mere diplomat brought here to serve a purpose. She's supposed to be neutral. She is not even hiding that she's pro this faction of the political divide. She doesn't care about Kenyans. She's here serving commercial interests. And we as Kenyans are supposed to clap for her because Ruto held an umbrella for her. That is the highest form of contempt. We are here because of colonialism. These are the offshoots of colonialism in the 60s and the 70s, and we still find ourselves in the age of the Aquarius. We are still complying with such nonsensical PR stance. So if we are saying occupy everywhere, we also include occupy US Embassy because number one, they have enabled this rogue regime. They have facilitated all these things you're seeing, the murders and the genocide and the massacres in Githurai and Rongai. But over and above that, they have implemented, because we have a weak Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they have implemented some immigration policy where Kenyans are made to feel as if we are going to beg for visas. You should make those decisions earlier so that if you're not going to give somebody a visa, you're going to refund 75% of the educational of the applicational fees, and I think everyone, we are on board with that. I'm going to touch on something about education. We are where we are because number one, of our media is very toxic. You have seen how they tried to suppress the numbers of the people in Kware, in Mukuru kwa Jenga. They were lying blatantly. Linus Kaikai, shame on you if you're listening. You're full of shit, you journalists. Journalists should not be allowed anywhere where we are doing our protests or doing our activities, because if you're going to get the real information from the people and then you go and alter it because you've been paid by State House, then we should not allow you to be there. So journalists are one part of the problem. Number two, we have religion. And number three, we have the educational curriculum. We've been talking about something called the quota system. I've been speaking about it severally. So during the Moi era, they came up, and during 844, they came up with something called the quota system, where now they select. It's almost like they sieve. It's almost like they cherry pick the best brains, which will go to some certain schools which have better facilities than the others. But if you look, and Jimmy was talking about the amount of money that has, we've been expending in the name of debt. We've been collecting. Now this year they've collected 2 trillion in taxes. They are going to borrow another probably 2 to 3 trillion in loans. But we are not seeing anything on the ground. The counties are not building anything. So the quota system, and there is this misconception that the government built Alliance School or the government built Mangu High School. No, the schools were started and they were donated by colonialists. They were donated by the colonialists because they had grabbed our land. Now they wanted to make some concessions to hoodwink the people who are stupid by then, to be hoodwinked with a church. It was always the Holy Trinity. So there was always a church, a school, and a hospital. So they hoodwink you with that. They give you that trilogy. And so the land was was donated, and then they mostly donated it to the church. But the parents who took their children there were always charged a development fee. And that development fee was in every fee structure. And that is what was used to build the schools. Over and above that, there used to be harambes. So there is nobody who can claim that the government has ever built any school. But why do we find ourselves with this so-called capitation? And again, I repeat that you idiots who are saying that Matiang'i should be president, you need to understand that they allocated hundreds of billions of shillings over 10 years to go to capitation, money that should have gone to build schools instead, so that instead of converting social amenities like halls into or dining rooms or whatever, instead of converting them into boarding facilities, then we would have expanded the educational facilities and educational access. I give you another example. We have, there's this saying that the closest school is the best school. So instead of having a boarding school where somebody, I saw there's a lady called Karibi who sings, and her son got an accident when he was leaving Chavakali coming back to Nairobi. Why are we subjecting students to these long journeys to go to school? What we should be doing, the closest school is the best school. Like now Nairobi, all the schools were amazing if you look at Upper Hill and whatever, but because subsequent boards, subsequent management, subsequent counties neglected them. So the schools have reduced and fallen in stature and in their quality of education they provide, but they were high-end schools if you look at them today. But even Kibera Olympic, it used to lead in the KCPE results. So what we need is not now to come up with more entry barriers under the guise of quota system and whatnot. Every county, every CDF, every constituency receives no less than 110 million per year. The cost of building a school is 10 million. Why are we all cramming? We are chasing all of us to go to Mangu, to go to Alliance, to go to where, while we should be concentrating on the amount of money that is stolen in the grassroots. You understand? It's the same thing with hospitals. The cost of building a referral hospital, KU, which was the last one, was 10 billion Kenya shillings. Why is everyone rushing to Nairobi to KNH while these governors are just blowing a lot of money? We already have the numbers. Thankfully, because of the likes of Jimmy Wanjigii, we've been able, I knew there was corruption. Trust me, 2 years ago, I knew there was corruption. I knew they used to steal money. I just never put it into context, the level at which the theft is perpetrated by the political class until I saw the actual numbers. So this is real. We are speaking about people who are repatriating our money, stashing it into foreign accounts. I was contacted by a group who said that they are the people who are behind Ruto not addressing the Congress, and they said now they are mapping all the bank accounts, foreign bank accounts that are stashing Kenyan proceeds of crime. Those are the same people you celebrate in the country. Those are the same people who you love and adore and whatever. So back to the illusion of national schools is that we now need to have national schools in every county. We've already identified that it costs 10 to 20 million to build a functional school with every facility. Then we abolish boarding school. Boarding school absorbs a lot of resources from parents because they have to invest in bed, they have to invest in uniforms, they have to invest in what? And sleep is not a productive activity. So that we lay more emphasis. First of all, we expunge religion from the curriculum. We remove the churches from managing schools so that they are run by professional boards. We lay more emphasis on sciences, on science, on technology, on agriculture, on sports and arts, so that we can create now so that we cannot have like 100% of our graduates, all of them aspiring to do business administration or to do what? No, we have artists, we have musicians, we have agronomists, we have everything. We have even vocational training. Now there is a shortage of, you get somebody to be an electrician for you. They are meeting you with a lot of shoddy work because they haven't perfected the art, and it has to start not just in high school but in primary school. But we've been bogging kids to do a lot of homework, carry big bags, waking them up, I don't know, at 5 a.m. to go to school. That is to learn important subjects which will not even be relevant in their careers in the future, while they should start. If somebody is good in sports, if somebody is good in music, if somebody is good in being an electrician or whatnot, they should start in primary school so that they start perfecting the craft earlier in life. So that is one of the and then the church has captured, especially our politicians, because our politicians now love masses when they go and address masses, and then it comes on TV, and then they feel they stroke their bloated egos after saying absolutely nothing. So the church can be there, as an oversight. And then religion should be a mandatory undertaking in every school. If a kid feels they are Christian, nobody should block them. If there's a Muslim, there should be all those facilities in every school. But they should not be driving policy. They should not be herding students to their mental impotence. We have seen the position they have taken in our political dynamics today. We don't trust them. We no longer listen to them, because they have shown us that given an opportunity, they will be always inclined to identifying and gravitating towards thugs and thieves like William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua and whatnot. So we remove them from the educational establishment, and let's start investing in our youth, so that sorry, Amerix, how much longer?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. So we expunged religion from the curriculum, because this CBC was an imposition of Fred Matiang'i and Uhuru and God knows who else. We don't know whether there was public participation, but even if there was, we have come to understand that public participation in Kenya is a formality. It's just done, for the cameras. But now let's be intentional. And even as we are talking about overhauling the political and economic structure, let every sector contribute in a way. You already know the challenges that affect you in whether it's in industry, whether it's in agriculture, so that we have one harmonized document to overhaul our economic blueprint, so that we build a new one, we anchor it to the constitution, so that in future, one president cannot wake up and say, oh, because I hate Jimmy Wanjigii, I used to love him, he's my friend, let me go rock up to his house and raid him when his family is there. We don't want to see such scenes again, and they will only be a figment of our imagination. They will only be a distant past if our reforms are intentional, if they are deliberate, and if they are forthright, and if we are all committed to the same particular process. Thank you very much, Amerix, for having me.
Thank you very much, Francis. Let me go back to Jimmy. Jimmy, can we continue the discussion again about the debt? You were talking about the four levels of debt in this country.
Yes, Amerix, I'm glad to be back. I was saying that we have what you call 4 pockets of debt. And the 4 pockets are described this way. The Paris Club pocket. This Paris Club pocket is the pocket that has the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, and a lot of the Western bilateral agreements. We have another, which is called the London Club debt. The London Club debt is where you have Euro bond, and you have syndicated loans. Very expensive debt. Then you have the Chinese debt. Some of it, most of it, very kosher, but there's been some malfeasance, which I'll explain shortly. It's very soft, but I'll tell you of something that was glaringly a big fraud on Kenyans. And the last pocket is what you call domestic debt. Now, remember what I said earlier, that in what is called the medium to long term, our law is very clear. You can only borrow for development. Only borrow for development. So you'll find in the bilateral, what you call the Paris Club debt, the bilateral ones, you'll find them on the budget. You'll find line items. For example, USAID is funding a bridge in Lamu, for example. Or British aid is funding something in education. Or there is a road being built by the Italians, and it's on the budget. It is always in what you call the appropriations bill. The appropriations bill is basically the budget according to our laws. Now, you'll find that. You'll find there is support for IMF and World Bank in the budget. It is there. Some budget is about going to line items, what are called vote items in the budget. Some of this IMF money I'll come to later, we are questioning what it's about because it is not in the budget. Now, you come to what you call this new pocket that was introduced over the last 10 years or so, called the London Club Pocket. Kibaki took a small portion of it as he was exiting, but it was really perpetuated under this regime of Uhuru Ruto. That pocket of London Club is very expensive commercial money, more or less commercial money. It comes from private investors. Eurobond comes from private investors looking for where they can put their money, right, and earn a good interest rate. So the interest rate was taken for our first Eurobond of 2 billion was about 6 or 7%, but it has gone up. Now, Eurobonds that the Uhuru Ruto government took was 7 billion. They have also taken a similar amount under syndicated loans, 7 billion. And I can tell you today that none of that money, because it is long term, it is beyond 1 year, none of that money, you're talking about $15 billion, appears anywhere in our budget. It funds not one project. It does not even, we don't even have it as appearing in the consolidated fund. It does not fund one item on the budget.
Fuck.
That is your London Club Pocket, and it is very expensive. Then you have the Chinese debt. The Chinese debt, most of it is anchored in our budget. It is very clearly stipulated what projects they're supporting. Right? If we are doing a road, if we are doing SGR, it has been there. But SGR has been a fraud of monumental proportions. And I'll simply put it this way, just to give you an example. Just to give you an example. I'm very familiar with this project called SGR. Very familiar. I initiated that project under the Kibaki regime. In fact, it was under the coalition agreement of Kibaki and Raila. We started that project in 2008, and that project was simply a private project. It had no government money. We wanted to do a private feasibility study because a company called RVR had failed. And we wanted to do private investment of a line from Mombasa all the way to Malaba. Right? Simply a private investment, no taxpayers' money. Our costing out of our feasibility study and our technical study came to 55 billion shillings. All the way from Mombasa to Malaba. I suddenly saw an amount of just Mombasa to Nairobi, somebody parachuting a project that had become government under the Uhuru Ruto government of 380 billion. Just Mombasa to Nairobi. That project from Mombasa to Naivasha costed for what were called the original construction plus rolling stock amounted to 500 billion shillings. So just to give you a summary. So the cost of the project is 500 billion. Chinese Exim Bank, that's the Chinese debt, say we are going to loan the Kenya government a total of 90% of that money. So Kenyans, you must raise 10%. 10% of 500 is 50 billion shillings. So us from our hard-earned taxes must pay 10% before they pay the 90%. So we did an audit of these amounts. It's part of our debt audit. We did an audit. What happened? Did the Chinese give us all the money that they said? Yes, they did. They gave all the money. It was paid directly to China Road and Bridge Company. The 90%. So did Kenyans raise the 50 billion, which was 10% of 500, right? And did they contribute their share of 10%? We did the sums. Now, on the loan part, I want you to remember we are servicing that loan at very expensive rates. In fact, this coming month, there's a big bill coming up. Now, did we raise the 50 billion as our contribution of 10%? So we did the numbers, right? And it's called Self-Raising Finance, SGR grant from the Treasury. So 50 billion was supposed to move from Treasury to Kenya Airways and then to the contractor called China Road and Bridge. So we just did the math. Eric, it was not 50 billion that was paid. It was 644 billion shillings that came out of the treasury to go to Kenya Railways, to then go to China Road and Bridge as self-raising finance for a project worth 500 billion. So we paid for it with our own money and even more. And yet we took a loan and we are paying back that loan. China Road and Bridge for the building of SGR from Mombasa to Naivasha was paid a total of almost 1.2 trillion for a project of 500 billion, according to the contract documents. So 700 billion above what was required. That is a frightening fact. Then you come to something called domestic debt. What you hear, bonds and bills taken from our local banks, insurance companies, pension funds. This amount of the total debt we're talking about, almost 11 trillion, today stands at 5.1 trillion. 800 from our pension funds, 700 from insurance companies, the rest from banks. In other words, it's our deposits, the Kenyans' deposit in our banks, that the banks have decided to take to the treasury, loan to the treasury, and then our taxes pay them their huge interest rates. So you can see where you see some bank CEOs earning humongous amounts of bonuses and all sorts of amounts like 300-400 million shillings a year. This is why our money going to our government and our taxes paying for all these banks to make humongous profits at our expense. You and I try and borrow, we are told to borrow at 25%. They are loaning to the government at 16%. It is a monumental fraud because, again, there is nowhere in our appropriations bills, revenue, that you can say, this money, look at bonds. The other day they took an infrastructure bond of 200 and something billion shillings. I think it was February. What infrastructure on the budget was being funded? Nothing. Nothing. These bonds and bills have funded nothing in our budget. And yet, do you know how much interest we have paid for 5.1 trillion over 10 years? We have paid them a total of 2.7 trillion in interest payments. This is criminality beyond your imagination. And there are some key banks here that have perpetuated this fraud. KCB, Cooperative Bank, Equity Bank. Those are three banks that have perpetuated a very clear fraud on the Kenyan public, us as depositors, and us as taxpayers, and made humongous profits, become oligarchs against the sovereign, against us. And we must start saying we are not going to take this rubbish anymore. And this rubbish goes this way. If you have deposits in those banks, if your parents have deposits in those banks, we should pull them out tomorrow, not today, not yesterday, not the day after, tomorrow, if not today. Remove that money. Take it to banks that are not defrauding us, because what is happening there is a fraud of the highest proportions. I want to go back to the London Club debts. These bonds, Eurobonds, these syndicated bonds, these syndicated loans, none of those appear on the budget. But one underlying fact you will find is that somewhere along the way, like you saw recently with the latest payments of Eurobond, the last payment of Eurobond was paid 500 so-called billion balance, right, of the 2 billion we had borrowed. That was paid by World Bank, IMF. Why are they underwriting money that never came to us? Who is this that they are backing? So here they are. They encourage us to take those very expensive loans, knowing full well they are not on a budget. And then when we can't pay, IMF comes up and it starts rattling. Oh, we can save you, but these are the conditions. And the conditions become a matter they become a matter of our slavery. Now, all this information I'm giving is in the public domain. Our forensic audit is in the public domain. We got it from public documents. We are not trying to create new documentation. And we've been speaking this for the last 2 years. Kenyans need to understand categorically that we are in a mode of slavery. And I'll perpetuate this slavery by going back to the point where we were saying today, 80% of our tax revenue is going to one item called debt. These debts I'm talking about, and which we have already paid for, don't owe, but we are going to keep being made to pay unless we cut off this chain because it is illegal, we do not owe it. This coming financial year, 2024-2025, the estimate from the Treasury of debt payments, keeping the current exchange rate, is 1.853164. In other words, 1.853 trillion shillings is going towards the debt payments this financial year of 2024-2025. You come to the year 2025-2026, it is 2.2 trillion to be paid to debt payments. You go to the next year, 2026-2027, is 2.352. And remember, we are getting what you call diminishing returns on our revenue, the Laffer curve, which is the maximum you can squeeze out of us. There is no item in our budget that is taking so much money. People are complaining about confidential funds of 700 million shillings. Look at this year. You tell me which item is taking over 1.8 trillion, one single item in debt payments, in any payment. Nothing is doing that. Nothing at all. This is the tragedy that we are living in. We are in slavery. And we are in such slavery that William Ruto is soon going to come and tell us that he can no longer pay it. And that we have been unable to pay it because, you people rejected the finance bill. Now I cannot raise revenue. So now I have to default on this payment. And the default means that they now start coming to your accounts. They start looking for your deposits. And they start telling you that you've got to take a share of this. Otherwise, the banks will close. And we're going to have serious problems here. Ghana went through this. And Ghana are suffering today. They are suffering from 2022 December, where 70%, 70 shillings of every 100 went to debt. They are suffering. And I can tell you, it is so tragic because you go back to the London Club debts. You go back to these so-called Muzungus Gaithoo is talking about. These criminals that have perpetuated this fraud even in places like Malaysia and gotten caught. These big firms called JP Morgan Chase. They have been part of a conspiracy because if you are going to loan anybody money, the first thing you must do is your due diligence. What are you giving this money for? Is it in line with the laws of Kenya? Which project is being funded? The Euro bond that was taken in 2013. Our investigation is very clear on this. It started an investigation all the way back in 2014. When I can tell you here on this show, a man called Jacob Juma, the late, he was my friend, came to visit me. And he tells me, Jimmy, I can tell you there's something fishy going on here. And you know all he had? He was just simply reading what are called the National Treasury quarterly reports. That is all. And he said, the president stood up when he said he's taking the Eurobond. And he said, because he's taking the Eurobond, they are not going to borrow domestically. The estimate at the time was about 300 billion shillings. So 3 billion almost euro, a Eurobond that he was taking. But when I look at the quarterly reports from the National Treasury, it seems they still borrow domestically from the local banks. And that's their quarterly report, not the budget, quarterly report. And they are not recording what happened to the Eurobond. So we started asking some questions. Unfortunately, we got the opposition leader, Raila Amolo Odinga at the time, to write a letter to the Treasury to ask, where are these Euro bonds? The 2 billion you say you borrowed, what has happened to it? On a bit of a scare for the then Minister of Finance called Rotich, he released documentation. And he showed the following, that $1 billion, they went out into the market and they managed to get $2 billion early 2014. In fact, by May 2014. And that $2 billion, they showed us what is called the expenditure pattern of those dollars. So they said, one of the first 1 billion, $650 million of that money went to pay a syndicated loan of Mwai Kibaki directly to a bank called Barclays Bank. In fact, Standard Chartered, sorry. And they showed us a SWIFT transfer of that amount. Then a SWIFT transfer is to show, like you get an RTGS that shows from point A to point B, it went to the account and was credited. Then they showed us that 350 balance of that first $1 billion, it went directly to the consolidated fund, exchequer account 00010,03987. And they showed us very clearly that account. 350 credited. We said, hallelujah, asante sana. Very good work. Then we said, where is the second one? They said, oh, the second one, we hung on to until September of that year. We don't know why they asked JP Morgan Chase to hang on to that. But they said it also came. We said, show us, like you showed us of the 350, show us this amount of 1 billion, how it came to the Treasury. Said, because the 350 that came to the Treasury, it came to the central bank, account number 1, it showed categorically that you had a SWIFT transfer. You even had your letters from CBK addressed to the Treasury, showing the exchange rate confirmation that you transferred to Kenya shillings. Show us the same for this $1 billion in September. They sent and put up a SWIFT transfer. But that SWIFT transfer did not show us where that money went. It was completely blackened out. Apart from the top, where you see it leaving an account at JP Morgan Chase, the rest was completely blackened out. Then they tried to quickly show us an amount in December that was directly from Citibank, what they called tap sales of $815 billion. Right? That $815 billion, they showed us the SWIFT transfer. It came to an account they had now created in the central bank called a sovereign wealth account. Some 10,12674 account, not the consolidated fund. We said, And then they showed us the communication from the same central bank saying we have credited this amount with an exchange rate of this value. We said, very good. Can you go back to the one of September? Where is it? They never, ever showed us. We eventually saw it in the Auditor General Special Audit of the Eurobond, done by Edward Awuko. And Edward Awuko, in his report, says that this amount entered an account called 8,214 something. We said, what account is this? We don't know it. We don't know it at all. What is this account? We never got a further explanation. But nobody dared to present even one iota of that SWIFT transfer like they had done for the others. Even the letter exchanging the amount from dollars to Kenya shillings, central bank saying this is the exchange value amount, they didn't show us. What we know is that that money, nobody has provided evidence that it entered this country. Now, the Auditor General in his report further goes to say that all these amounts cannot be attached to not even one project. And actually, even in his conclusion, says that when he asked the Treasury, what were these monies so-called used for? The Treasury says that these funds are fungible. In other words, they're interchangeable. They can do what they want with them. In other words, they admitted they are breaking the law. That is just one Eurobond of $2 billion. One did not come here. They subsequently took another 5. Please take note. They subsequently took another 7 in syndicated loans. We cannot find anywhere in our budget and in our books. Now, Kenyans, are we going to continually accept that we are going to become slaves and have agreed to become slaves? Because this is what is called modern day slavery. Now, and for generations to come, the perpetuating our poverty and our slavery. In the old days, slavery was something that was done with chains put to our hands and our feet. That is what is happening here with this debt. Debt has now been used by our own oligarchs, our own people in power, and of course, in collaboration with others outside this land. Others outside this land who know what is going on, who know the illegalities of what has been perpetuated, to ensure that we are slaves to them in perpetuity. You can complain about the finance bill today or tomorrow, which are tax-raising measures, but we are going down so fast as a nation. The poverty rates are increasing by the day because of one item. Anything that is collected from us is going to others, and it never came to our use. And it's going in such large amounts. It is strangling us. It is finishing us for generations to come. And my proposal has been very clear. What is not in our laws, what does not exist in our constitution, is not liable to the sovereign. We are not and should not pay it. We must cut this chain off our neck. We must remove it. And those who put us in this mess must pay the ultimate price of justice for the people of Kenya, because they have caused havoc to our lives. We have said continually that this regime will not change it because it was part and parcel of doing what we are suffering. They are not going to hang themselves. So William Ruto should not pretend that he can set up a task force to come and whitewash what he knows he's capable to. He is not going to tell us that we will not accept. This is a fraud of monumental proportions. We are unlike other countries that have had to shut down because of debt. Ours we do not have. And I can tell you, with all the sums we have paid, my fellow Kenyans, we do not owe any debt to anybody. We do not. In fact, if we remove that debt from our books, I can tell you have a reduction of taxation and you'll have money in your pockets like you've never seen before. But people are hostage to their own creations. And we must reach a stage now where we say we are going to cut off. We are not going to be anybody's slaves. And we must cut this link. And those who are perpetuating it must face justice. And those foreigners who have been part of this, who have been perpetuating this, who know what they are doing to our demise as a country, we will also follow you. We will look for you. You are criminals. You have aided criminality. In Malaysia, you were found. In Mozambique, you were found. You shall be found even in Kenya. And those who are protecting them, please. We used to have big friends. The West have been good friends of Kenya in the past. Why do you want us to be your slaves? We are just as good, if not better than you. We deserve more, and we are not going to take this nonsense anymore. So my fellow Kenyans, we start with our own. Those who are perpetuating our slavery in something called domestic debt, those culprits, those oligarchs, must be dealt with now. Tomorrow, the day after that, go take your money from those banks. Tell them they are not at liberty to continue your slavery. Tell those banks that decide they are going to put money in bonds and bills, to our detriment, bonds and bills, money that does not enter the consolidated fund, money that is going to buy bullets to kill our children, that we cannot account for. We are not going to agree anymore. Stop them and tell them that you are going to go and greet them if they perpetuate this mentality. But now that they have done it and they have sunk us, take your money back. Tell them you are going to put to enterprises and banks that are not perpetuating your slavery. Let us start at home and we shall deal with the rest one after the other. Asanteni sana, Eric.
Hey, Jimmy Wanjigii. That was like
All
30
right.
minutes of facts.
My goodness. So you, Jimmy, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
So you, what have you done, or what are you doing in your position? Because I know you are capable. You have the means. What are you doing in your position to ensure that justice on this economic fraud is given to Kenyans? Because Kenyans right now are unable to put money in their pockets.
That's correct.
Bad.
That's correct, Americans. And I can tell you, they will not be able to. As long as we have this monster, they will not. So the first thing is that we must get rid of these people from power. Anybody that has aided and abated this must get out of power. We must have a fresh broom. They must be removed from power because they will never accept to cut off this chain. They were part of creating it. So we must get power. That is number one. And this revolution, I want to congratulate this revolution. This is the only way. I want to congratulate those who are doing it. I want to say categorically here, I condole with the soldiers, the fallen soldiers of this revolution. And you shall one day receive commendations from a government that understands that you are heroes of this republic. We must cut off this chain, and it comes by cutting off these people in power. They must exit power. That is number one. In our own way, we have educated people. There are people who are taking up cases in courts abroad, because there's no point of trying to do it here. We have seen our courts do amazing things that you wonder what law they follow. There are people who are taking up cases in Paris and in London, right? For various aspects of this debt. Human rights lawyers who are doing so out of their own volition pro bono. But this is not about one or two items. It is not about others saving us. It is not about just Jimmy Wanjigii. It is about us collectively saying it is to our demise to continue this. It must be all of us saying we are not going to agree. We are not going to agree that our children were born to be slaves and their children to be even worse slaves than they were. We must say no. And we must collectively come together and agree that that can only come with a dynamic shift that we are seeing today. This is a moment that is earth-shaking for this republic. We use it and do it properly. We will never be chained. We will see greatness in this nation. And you see us stretch this wave beyond the borders of this land. And you shall see somebody called the Great Kenyan that will be more dominant than you're seeing those Western nations. But we must get rid of this chain. This is our chain. No matter what you do, no matter where you go, no matter which way you move, if you do not remove this chain, we are done. There's no other solution. You can talk about all other things you want to talk, but I can tell you, if you do not remove this chain, we are moving nowhere. And anybody telling you they can perform will not perform if they're not talking about removing this chain. All there is balderdash. It is lies. You have to remove this chain. And we do not own it. We do not have it. It is actually illegal. So we are educating, Americs. We are educating. We've taken 2 years. We spent money doing this forensic audit. We are educating. We are talking. We keep speaking. When I first started speaking, I remember people saying, but who understands all these figures, all these terminologies? Kenyans are not about the economy. They want to hear us. I said, one day, Kenya will be about issue orientation. Issues are going to drive their politics, not tribalism. Issues, their lives, their collective lives as a great Kenyans is going to drive them. So I will keep educating. I will keep informing. And you can write me off all you want, but I'll keep speaking. One day, somebody will hear. Because this pain will not stop. It can only grow. I've given you the figures this financial year, the next financial year, the year after that, and increases even more thereafter. This pain will continue because there's also something else it has set in. There are two twin evils, just to digress a bit in economics. It's called recession and inflation. So at the beginning of the year, everybody was complaining about the high cost of living. Things are very expensive. Then William Ruto says, now prices are down. It is so simple in economic terms. When you have inflation, you just tap liquidity. You trap the market, you remove money from the market. So you raise interest rates, your banks are told to bring in more money to central bank. So you remove liquidity. But when you remove liquidity, now everybody says they have no money in their pocket. Things are very bad. Goods are there, they're still high, they have no money in their pocket because you create recession. And you fast-pace recession. Recession was always there. In other words, the growth of a nation. You stop it, you stunt it, you start going down. And the only way to solve that problem when you have those two twin devils is to reduce taxation. So you give leeway. This government cannot reduce taxation because 80% of it is going towards an item called debt. And William Ruto is so afraid of debt default because it is even more painful. He's so afraid. He's so afraid of even calling it odious and cutting it off because that means an investigation and he doesn't want to be found and they all don't want to be found. They are so afraid of all the options. So I can tell you, even if today you gave him peace to form his government or a new government or people want to join, I can assure you, you'll be back on the streets. This pain won't stop. They have no solution for your lives. They are wasting your time. In fact, I don't even know why he's still in office. The man should just stand up and say, Mimi nimeshindwa, asanteni sana. Let us call a general election. Other people can do this. They have greater ideas than I do to solve this problem, or maybe more guts. This has happened to other people in the world. You get to a stage where you cannot solve the problems. I remember in England the other day, in the UK, you had a prime minister, you had 3 prime ministers in 1 year because they could not solve this problem that had been created out of the liquidity out of COVID in the UK. They literally printed money and they couldn't solve it. Now here you have a situation where, if we are to be honest, and Ruto is to be honest with himself, he cannot solve this problem. No matter what he talks, he cannot solve it because he's too tied in it. Don't waste Kenya's time. There are always other people who can do this. Get out of the way. Exit honorably. Usher us through another general election where now Kenyans are listening to the issue. They're not being cheated by marupurupu and goodies to be given. There's no goodies here. We have a problem to solve because if we solve this problem, our greatness begins. And I say our greatness because it was just interrupted. We were on our way to our greatness, it was interrupted. Our greatness begins. Allow those that the people feel can solve their problem to sit there. You don't have to hang in there. There's nowhere where it says you must have a contract of 5 years.
Hang in there, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
I see my co-host Nyakundi is there. And there is a lady here who was talking about Pan-Africanism and IMF and World Bank. Maybe Nyakundi, can you bring her?
Excuse me. Hello.
Just hold on a minute, Tony. Just a minute.
Tulikuwa nataka hawa kubwa kubwa. Tumegonga wangapi? Tumegonga gapi? Wote. Hata Kidiki.
Commercial break very.
Ndio rahisi nikekupata kwa kiasi ngekunulia chai.
Yes. Where's that lady? Kadhomi.
Good evening, Eric and the
Yes,
team.
go on.
Yeah, go on.
Thank you so much for having me in this space. Just a bit about myself. I have experience in election observation.